the Writing Talk podcast with Mikey Campling. Hello and welcome back to the Writing Talk podcast, which has been on something of a hiatus for a little while. So first off, just apologies to anybody who is following along from the first wave of listeners. You're probably wondering what the heck has happened to me and where this podcast has vanished to. And I'm afraid it was just, I was very busy, a lot of work on with my writing. And in fact, I still do have a lot of work on with that. We've just recently launched my new sci-fi techno thriller called Cheat Code with a 0 instead of an O, which is, up there on Amazon as of not long ago, and managed to shift a few copies so far. So it's a good read if you're interested in that. I've also got the next 2 Darkening Stone novels in the pipeline. So one of them is with an editor still, having its second pass through an editor via my publisher Book Trope, and the other one I am still working on. We're nearly at the end of its first draft, so exciting times there to be finishing out a trilogy, which is quite an achievement really for me. It's something that I really wanted to do right from the beginning, and it's nice to be finally achieving some of my goals. So although I'm still terribly busy, I am relaunching the podcast today, and really I just decided that there is never a good time to start something like this. That's how I started with my writing. I actually heard somebody being interviewed who I think, if my memory is right, this was a long time ago, it was the novelist P.D. James, who writes the crime series starring Inspector Dalgleish as one of her main series, I think. And I think it was her being interviewed, and she said, well, I decided there was never going to be a good time to start, so I would just do it. I'd just get up early or whatever it was that she said and get on with it. And I kind of thought, well, yeah, maybe I should start my writing, and I've always wanted to do it, and that was many years ago. And so the same with this podcast. I think if you're keen on something, if you're passionate about it, really you just have to make yourself start at some point, and then if you possibly can, just try and do it at every available opportunity every day if you can, because there's nothing like building up a head of steam, a bit of momentum to get you going with something. So I am hoping to put one of these out every week. I've signed up for a new hosting account for the media with an outfit called Spreaker, which is quite fun because you can even do little things like this during your show, and you can make a little live radio show. Anyway, thank you very much. So that goes on a long time, doesn't it? Okay, I won't keep doing things like that. It's annoying, isn't it? So anyway, if you've been listening on for a while, thank you very much for sticking with me, and thank you for being patient. If you're new and you're thinking, well, there hasn't been a gap, well, that's great. We'll just pretend I didn't say any of that. Okay. So we are on to episode 8 at long last. And I thought, as a part of the new relaunch, part of the new structure, I'm going to give it a go of following through, almost like a course, though I'm not saying this is a course at all. But having that kind of structure, it makes sense to me. I'd spent over a decade teaching, and it kind of makes sense to me to take things through in a logical order. So I'd like to start off today talking about getting your first concepts together and working week by week through to looking at the different aspects that go up to making a finished novel. So I hope that's something that will be of interest to people. And of course, you can always, the great thing about podcasts is you can always skip backwards and forwards, can't you, if you want to skip something. But you never know. You might think, well, I'm way past that stage. But, you can always learn from people, I think. And sometimes I think to myself, we all have doubts about things. And I think to myself, well, who am I to be doing this podcast? Am I the greatest writer in the world? No, definitely not. Well, as I said, I have been a teacher for a long time. And I think if I can get a 10-year-old kid who'd much rather be playing Xbox to write a story, then I can probably get you to write one too. So that was one of my great passions as a teacher, to get all the kids reading really good quality stuff and writing really good quality stuff. And it was amazing what you could get out of kids, 9, 10, 11 years old. Used to produce some amazing stuff, really great, because they don't have those barriers and the things that hold us back. Inhibitions is the word I'm looking for, isn't it? Those inhibitions that we get when we're older. They're not afraid to be original. They don't know any different. They just crack on with it and produce something original, which is wonderful. Okay, so going back to basics. And really, I'd like to start talking about how to avoid writing your novel. There's a wonderful talk by Ray Bradbury, which I'll put a link to in the show notes at writingtalkpodcast.com. And it's worth a watch. It's quite long and rambling, but Ray Bradbury was a master of the short story. And it has this section in there where he tells people, don't write novels. People are always telling me they write novels, but don't, forget about it. Write some short stories, because the idea is if you keep working away at your craft through repeating a process over and over again, then you give yourself a really fighting chance at improving really quickly. Whereas if it takes you 5 years to write a novel and then you start going through it again, well, it's going to take you an awful long time before you can really finish that novel. And so many writers, they'll tell you, oh yeah, I spent 10 years writing my first novel. I spent, 7 years writing my novel. And kind of, I did that as well. And what a shame, really, because they could have improved their craft faster. And because the other thing writers always say, of course, is, I spent 7 years writing this novel and it's rubbish. It will never see the light of day. It's under the bed, in a shoebox, which is where dreams go to die, apparently. And, it is a crazy thing. So let's start off thinking big in terms of story and in terms of our ambition, but starting very small in terms of actual word count. Let's set ourselves some hard limits. What we're after here is not producing something huge, because stories don't come by the pound or the kilo. They come in terms of moments, those moments that you are able to communicate to your readers, those moments when your readers are perhaps on the edge of their seat, holding their breath, or wiping away a tear, or, jumping in surprise. Really, those are the moments that make a story great. And they don't need lots of words. What they need is a sense that they are genuine. They need a sense of integrity and honesty. Those are the things that shine through. It's a bit like if you watch some of these dreadful reality talent shows where you have singers come on, and you think a lot of these people, they're never really great, most of them. You get the occasional one who you think they actually put so much emotion and honesty into their performance that, it really does send a tingle down your spine. And it's a bit like that, really. It's about, you have to put yourself on the line a little bit and become a little bit vulnerable, and you have to write with enormous integrity and honesty. Those are the things that must shine through your work if it's going to be worth something. So that's one point, and I think it's easier and more manageable to hone those skills in a short piece than it is over the length of a novel to start with. And it is quite easy to sort of go through 80,000 words of a novel and find that that element is missing. I'm afraid that's all too easy to do. The other important thing here to remember, I think, is that really the magic comes in the rewrites, in much the same way as a work of art is kind of finished and made wonderful by those last few hours and days that the artist spends really polishing that piece of work, whatever it is. It's in the rewrites, because the first draft might be fantastic, but it should be vastly improved by your rewriting. And it's not a question of this just being a process. It really is part of it, and something you must embrace, that it isn't done really until you've rewritten it several times, perhaps. Now, rewriting is a whole novel is a very daunting prospect that few of us face with a spring in our step, I expect. But if we've got something like a short story or even a piece of flash fiction, it's much easier to sit down and think, right, let's take this to bits, let's cut it, let's polish it, let's swap pieces around, let's add, let's take away, whatever it needs. And then it's done. And then you go on to your next iteration, because you're your next story, you're going through the same process, but starting from a slightly better starting point. So I do recommend it. I mean, although I started originally very early on aiming to write a novel, I did begin by writing flash fiction of 100 words a shot, and they were my first projects. And I would get up early in the morning and just try and write one and try and polish it and have it exactly 100 words. And something like that, it just gives you something to work on whilst you're getting going. Okay, so where do we start with this? Let's think about how we can put all this together. So I would suggest that we really start with writing from our own experiences, because then we are giving ourselves a chance to show that honesty, that integrity, that little bit of vulnerability that makes it seem real. So we can take quite a mundane thing from our lives if necessary and write about that, turn it into a little story. I don't mean like writing a diary entry, but actually writing the story of a scene or a moment from our own lives. So today I'm going to try doing this and see how much response we get. I'm going to try and do some writing prompts and see how we go. If we don't get many people participating, then never mind. I'll keep on, and you can always just take them at face value and see if you can play around with them. So I would like to set you this little task. I'd like you to write very honestly a short piece that is based entirely on something of your own experience. It doesn't have to be dramatic. The theme is doing something I didn't want to do. Now, that could be anything from a trip to the dentist or a mundane task like doing the washing up. It could be something quite emotional like the end of a relationship, or perhaps delivering bad news to someone. So it could be as dramatic or as mundane as you wish. And I'd like you to write about it in a short number of words. I would say somewhere around the 500 word mark would probably be fine, though obviously I'm going to leave the length of it up to you because this isn't a competition. Feel free to change things around in your piece, and particularly to sort of respect your own privacy and the privacy of anyone else involved, but try to respect the fundamental content. Try and keep it faithful to the actual events and emotions of the time. The aim is to make the reader live that experience alongside you. So it could be a trip to the dentist, and you could add some humorous elements. You know, the tone is totally up to you, but make us live it alongside you and enjoy it, or commiserate with you, depending on the tone of it, alongside you as if we were there with you. And importantly, don't write this for me, write it for you. When you've done it and you're happy with it, rewrite it as much as you think is necessary. Just take your time, whatever time it takes to polish it and make it shine. Whenever you like, whenever you're ready, post it up somewhere at your online space. So if you've got a blog or something like that, post it up there, because there isn't really room in the comments here. But what I'd like you to do, please, is go to this post, find this episode on writingtalkpodcast.com. It's episode 8. It should be easy to find from there. And just put a comment and a link so that people can go along to find it. And then please, if there are some there and you want to read them and provide positive feedback for other people, that would be great. And perhaps they'll leave some for you. I will try and check in as much as possible, but like I say, I'm quite busy, and I'm pushing even to get this podcast out. So I'll do my best to have a little look. So I'm going to cut that short there. We're coming up to about 15 minutes, and I'm not going to do a lot of editing, so I'm sorry if there's any background noises or anything cropping up, because if I do that, I won't have time to do the podcast. So I hope you'll forgive any lessening in quality if it means I actually do the thing, because I think that's most important of all. So thank you very much for watching and listening. Sorry, I've been used to recording videos. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. You can subscribe on Stitcher, I'm having a problem with my iTunes at the moment, but perhaps by the time you hear this, it will have reinstated itself. And you can probably find it on Spreaker as well. But I will put all the notes on the site at writingtalkpodcast.com. And comments are always welcome. Shares are really appreciated. Ratings and subscriptions will be fantastic. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, and I'll see you hopefully next time. Keep writing, folks.